Hello, I'm Mike Hill. In this video, I'm going to be talking to John Spence. Welcome, John.
Great to be back in Durham, Mike.
And we're going to be talking about how the church is wealthy, how that wealth is and might be used for the benefit of parishes, and we'll talk about some of the wider perspectives of church finance as well. Okay, let's go and talk.
Great, let's go.
So give us a sense of your experience, both in the church and more particularly in finance. Who are you, John?
I'm just a lad from the pews. I grew up in Edinburgh, went to university in Dublin and joined Lloyds Bank in Liverpool. Came up to the northeast about 40 years ago now and lived in Wickham near Gateshead, where I had my first Halls Treasurer role for the PCC. We moved down to London because my job took me there, and I became finance chairman of Chelmsford Cathedral while pursuing my career through, and I was a managing director of Lloyds TSB until 2005. I always have to say that, Mike, because it was all right when I left it. And I became a church commissioner for 9 years in 2004 before they rather persuaded me or even blackmailed me into doing the role of finance chairman of the Archbishop's Council for the last 5 years, well, 4.
Big question, of course, John. The church is very wealthy. It's sitting on billions of pounds worth of reserves and assets. The Diocese of Durham itself sits on millions of pounds of assets. Why can't these be used instead of raising giving through the parish share?
3 reasons I'll give you. Firstly, we need to raise money every year. You can only use your reserves once. Once they're used, they're gone. And they're not all that they crack out to be, but I'll come back to that. Secondly, you'll know many people, and there'll be people listening to this, who are what they call asset rich and cash poor. So they have the nice house, but they have all the obligations go with it, and the income isn't what it was. We have big amounts of assets, it's true. We need to keep a lot of those for clergy housing or other needs in the future and pension funds. And that doesn't match the income that then needs to come through. But thirdly, nationally, we do have another big pot of money. That's managed by the church commissioners, but that is on a trust fund basis in that they have the legal responsibility to ensure that that money is available for future generations. So we can only access the income of it, and quite a lot of the income goes on pensions.
Now, at a national level, you have taken the decision to use some of the assets that the church has to promote growth through making us bid for investment for specific purposes. Why can't you just give us the money and let us decide how we use it in the parishes?
Yeah, well, that's what used to happen, of course, under something called the Darlow formula. The funds were passed out to the dioceses. And the trouble was they just got lost in the system. I know, I was a DBF chair as well. I forgot that one, didn't I? In Chelmsford, and the money just came in and got swallowed into the budget. What does success look like, Mike? Success for me isn't balancing the books. Finance isn't an end game. You need to balance the books in order to have the investment to grow the church back again, to get the investment so that we can go back and re-evangelize communities that were no longer seen, that the risen Christ can be evident in far more homes and hearts than he maybe is today. And if you believe that, then what you want to do all the time is use your monies for the best possible investments that can be used in growth. And that means we have to say to every diocese, we know what your strategy is, you tell us that, we're there to support your strategy, you tell us how you'd like to use the money, we'll help work in it with you, and you'll then have that. You can't just go back to the general subsidy if you have the chance of having proactive, carefully thought through investment to get the best impact.
We've talked about bidding for investment for specific purposes on a national level. What about on a more local level? Why can't the Diocese of Durham use its assets in a similar way to support its parishes?
It's entirely up to the Diocese of Durham what it does. There are legal controls on some of the sums of money that can only be used for certain things. But ultimately, we all have the responsibility, don't we, to start first. Where the rubber hits the road, which is the parish, it needs to be self-sustaining in order then that we can bring together, garner the monies for investment. And by the way, we'll keep every cost control that we can at the centre in order that we maximise the funds. I'm always conscious that every penny that gets spent in the church nationally is a penny we've taken away from a parish.
So what of the parish then that might say, look, we're broke, we're in a poor area, we haven't got a vicar, all the congregation are pensioners and there's only 6 of us anyway. How can we possibly pay our parish share? What would be your advice to them?
Well, you give a very extreme case there. I empathise generally with those people who have got expensive buildings to maintain. There aren't many of us, we're getting older, and all that piece. There does come the bit, of course, where if you get really to extremes, you need to think about whether your family is sustainable or you need to join with others. But what I will say is this: when I inherited this role, every penny that was taken virtually in the national budget was taken from dioceses. I've looked to other sources of funding now, and there's a gap of quite a few £1 million between the money we spend in the national budget and that which we ask dioceses to contribute. I'd say to a parish, have you thought about different ways of bringing money in? Have you thought about some of the really successful Friends of schemes, where you say to a town, you want a church, you may not come every Sunday, but you want to have somewhere where you can have your funeral, or your daughter can get married, your grandchild baptised, then voluntarily give to this giving scheme. And there are schemes around the country that are raising thousands of money. The more we can help our wonderful parishioners, Mike, move away from the obligation just of shepherding the building and to have the opportunity of reaching out and evangelising the community of which they're a part. The more we can do that by finding different ways to fund buildings and to keep that bit of the fixed assets being maintained, how wonderful it will be. Success, I'll remind you, is not about balancing the books, it's about growing the work of Christ.
John, thank you very much.